Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 9 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm your host Ingrid. If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. In today's episode, we're talking to Leslie Josel, owner of Order Out of Chaos, working in and around New York. She's a professional organizer specializing in ADHD, and today we are chatting to her about getting organized when you have ADHD. Leslie launched her professional organizing business, Order Out of Chaos, in 2004. Originally, she focused on working with the chronically disorganized, ADHD, students with learning challenges, and hoarding behaviors. She then added coaching services and educational products for students and parents. Leslie is the creator of the award-winning Academic Planner, a tool for time management, and she writes articles for Attitude Magazine and Family Circle Magazine. She's an accomplished speaker, both nationally and internationally. She's an author and co-author of 2 books, and most recently she was awarded the NAPO, National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals, 2018 award. I've had the pleasure to hear Leslie speak at the UK Association's conference last March, and I'm lucky enough to be her friend. Oh, thank you so much for being on the show, Leslie.
Okay, not the way you want to start a podcast with crying, but that was unbelievably, I hope I live up to that. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
We are delighted to have you, and we can't wait to get the recording of this podcast started, and I'm going to ask you loads of questions.
All right, fire away, honey.
All right. Leslie, my first question is, I would like to know a little bit about your background and how you became a professional organizer.
Okay, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version because I don't want we could be here all day. So my son Eli is 20, and when he was 5, so we're going back about 15 years ago, he was diagnosed with ADHD, executive dysfunction, and a whole host of learning, differences. He was, not so much now, your quintessential gifted student with learning differences. And back then, this is super important, there weren't podcasts like yours, there weren't conferences, there wasn't a ton of information. So I really had to rely a lot on my instinct and my gut to figure out ways to untangle his worlds, both at home and at school. And to make a very long story very short, what I did back then was considered pretty revolutionary. I took doors off closets, I took dressers out of rooms and lined them with clear plastic bins. I coated things in my home blue because that calmed him. So maybe not so much now, but back then people weren't really doing those types of hacks, you might call them. Mm-hmm. Anyway, people saw what I was doing, friends of friends of friends of friends, and all of a sudden I started getting phone calls going, I saw what you did in Lisa's house because I did something for a very good friend of mine. Can you come and do it for me? And the calls kept coming. And I remember I turned to my husband and I said, and I was working at the time. And I said, but I don't do this for a living. And everything entrepreneurial spirit my husband has, he went, well, I think you do now. And that is literally the true story of how Order Out of Chaos was born. And at the time, I was a sole entrepreneur, home to home, house to house, ADHD family to ADHD family. That was really what I focused on. I didn't do the garage basement. That wasn't my thing. It was really ADHD family creating homes that would work, systems and supports and scaffolding. And now, 15 years later, I'm an academic life coach for teens and college students with ADHD and learning disabilities. And we are actually a virtual company. Everything we do is virtual. We do no longer, we do coaching, but again, virtual. We do nothing in homes anymore.
I see.
We're a global audience.
So you weren't an organizer who specialized in ADHD. You were confronted with ADHD in your son and kind of then became a professional organizer specializing in ADHD.
Is that amazing? I always say I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Yeah. I did not know how much to charge, what to cost. I just knew that the work I was doing was transformational. Mm-hmm. That for my own home and for homes that I walked into, I really had a knack, I think I can say that, for understanding how to think out of the box to create systems and structures that worked not only for the student, but also for the family. So I was really working with individuals, and we still do. That will always be our mission, is to work with families who are really suffering and really don't know what to do next and how to create ways to untangle. I love saying untangle. I think that is just a great visual, and untangle the world. And we do both at home and at school. So we don't only coach students, we also spend a great deal of time working with parents, helping them on a multitude of things. Let's say their child was just recently diagnosed, or navigating the school system, or ways to set up structures and systems. Anything to create sanity and peace and systems in a household.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just for clarity,
yes.
Can you tell us the exact definition of what ADHD means?
Well, you know what? I'm going to say this, that I don't know if there's an exact, everyone has a different definition these days of what ADHD is. So I don't know if I could give you an exact. But here's what we do know about ADHD. We know that the main symptoms, or the main things we see with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is impulsivity, inattention, and hyperactivity. Mm-hmm. But what we're actually seeing more and more of these days is that it's really not I want to say this correctly, it's not an inattention, because those that have ADHD actually can attend. They can focus. It's actually what they call a self-regulation. It's those that are there are those that are so hyper-focused that we can't bring them down to where they need to be. And there are those that can't activate, and we need to bring them up to where they need to be. So actually what we're seeing more and more of is they're calling ADHD more about self-regulation. It's that impulsivity and inattention and bringing it to balance. So that's, I think, a great way to look at it.
Okay. And have you got any idea? I mean, I know you might not know these figures, but I was wondering this when we were talking. How many people have ADHD? Do we know that actually? Is there any?
Well, I do know for you. I actually know you're based in the United Kingdom.
Oh.
So I actually know that answer. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
So actually, this was about a year ago, these stats, and they came off of the ADA UK, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to read it. It's 3 to 7%, which is really, I think, an amazing number considering how many people live in the UK. But here's the interesting statistic: is 60. That's for children. But 65% of that 3 to 7% will continue with their ADHD symptoms through adulthood.
Oh, wow.
So it is prevalent, very, very prevalent. And I would guess that in the United States, there'd be even more, just because of the number, the population. Mm-hmm. You bring in a bigger population, you're going to bring in a bigger percentage. But for me, it's not so much how many students have it, it's the continuation into adulthood with those symptoms. So it is paramount that we really get to and I call them students, that's just my language. We get to those students early on to really give them the support and scaffolding that they need, so that when they do enter into adulthood, they've kind of learned what it is that, they're self-aware, and they really understand what works best for them. I think that's paramount.
Yeah. And I think also the 3 to 7% is the people that we know of. But of course, there's a lot of people who aren't even diagnosed yet, right?
Yes. So it's interesting because you mentioned also the definition. And one thing I should have mentioned is that, and I think this is really, really important for those that are listening. So, because if anyone takes anything away from this podcast, this is what I want you to hear me say. If you have attention deficit disorder, ADHD, you automatically have executive dysfunction. So, but you can have executive dysfunction and not have ADHD. And particularly for our younger population, executive function, and some people even say ADHD is an executive dysfunction disorder. Executive functions are what controls our actions. It's what controls our organizing, our time management, our effort, our focus, even our mood regulation, our working memory. So even though somebody might not be diagnosed with ADHD, the numbers to me don't represent, because you could have executive dysfunction and not have ADHD and still present with symptoms. So excellent question, and a really important distinction to make.
Thank you. So you are a chronic disorganized and hoarding specialist.
Yes.
Now, have you found, I think it's kind of an extension to this question, have you found people who have ADHD are typically chronically disorganized, or is that a generalization you can't make?
I think it's a generalization. So so in the interest of true disclosure, you asked fabulous questions, and I thought that was one of the best questions I've ever been asked by anyone. I have to say that, because people assume just because you have chronic disorganization or ADHD, excuse me, that you're automatically disorganized. So number one, I look at disorganization not just about your stuff and space, but also in time. So that's something that's also like, there are a lot. So I have come across, I've been doing this for 15 years, where I've met a lot of people with executive dysfunction and ADHD who are actually organized. They're organized in their stuff. My son would be one of them. I always say this, my son came out of the womb organized, believe it or not, in his stuff. But time management, he was not organized in his time. So yes, you can absolutely have ADHD or EF, which is easier to say EF, and actually have organizing skills, because for some, organization helps to calm the mind. So I don't think one always goes hand in hand. I don't. Now, when it comes to those that hoard, I do think organization is a tremendous problem, but I think it stems from other things. I think it stems from maybe not know how to categorize things, not how to, how to relate your items to each other. I also think a lot of it is that everything has great importance. So if you don't have it, so if everything has the same importance, nothing has it, so that everything is in your eye line. Because there isn't the distinction of, I can put that away because it's not as important, and keep out what is. Yeah. So with hoarding, I've never seen anyone be a super organized, hoarder.
Right.
But ADHD I have.
That is really interesting, because and I've been an organizer for 8 years. I'm so glad we're actually talking about this, because I always assumed that if you have ADHD, you are chronically disorganized. But in your experience, it can be either the stuff or the space
or
the time,
right?
Or all three of them, or just one of them.
So here's the way to understand it, which I think might really help your listeners. So if you have you have ADHD, you automatically have executive dysfunction. Now, one of those executive dysfunctions is organization. But there's time management, there's working memory, there's effort, there's focus. You do not necessarily have to have all of them. There are people that have executive dysfunction who might be super organized, but have absolutely no time management. Or they're super disorganized, but their working memory is working. So I have actually worked with individuals, particularly students. It's really amazing to me. Organization for their stuff and space is not their issue. It's time and effort and working memory that is. So, no. Interesting, right?
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. And of course, I've heard you speak about this as well. So I already feel that I've got quite a basic knowledge of this. But I think just to have it so clearly explained, it makes it really, really much more comprehensible, I think, for people. So if somebody how can people who have ADHD recognize they might need help? Mm-hmm. Or maybe, I think also, if people don't have ADHD or are not diagnosed as having ADHD, what kind of things
should they look for?
Yeah, what kind of examples can you give me of the challenges? So what do you see? You already mentioned time and space, but what in a typical, if somebody's at home now, if one of our listeners is at home and thinks, okay, I've got ADHD, or wow, I'm hearing Leslie talk and I'm thinking I might have ADHD. So what are the things that you see over and over again?
Okay. So I think that, we can go granular and we can go broad. I want to go broad first. I really think that, sometimes we we're funny and we misdiagnose and we say, oh, I lost my keys today. Oh my God, I have ADHD. Okay. Losing your keys on occasion does not mean you have ADHD. I think, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the person that says, I have boxes from my childhood in the basement, I must be a hoarder. That's not what hoarding is. But so on a granular level, on a big level, on a wide scope, you have to see how these things that I just mentioned to you, are they affecting your quality of life? Do we all misplace our keys every now and then? Yes. But are you constantly like losing your keys or not on time and not have that relationship, let's say at a time where you are getting out the door half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour late, showing up at work, your boss is very much, upset with you and you're at the brink of losing your job? Is your disorganization really impacting your relationship with the people you live with in the house? I'm not talking about a little clutter here and there, but is it such a disaster in your home that it's really created so much, strife between you and the people that live there? So when we talk about chronic disorganization, to know if we really truly have that, we talk about how is it affecting us? How is it truly affecting? Can we get out the door in the morning? Can we get to work on time? Can we get our kids out the door in the morning? Are you having trouble on a daily basis completing your tasks? Now, I'm not saying, can you understand a true understanding between time and task? You have a relationship with time. That's a big one, because I think organization is much easier because we see it. I think it's very hard to feel time and see time. So can you see your time? Do you understand how long things take? I always want people to ask questions on the bigger end and then on the granular, because I think that's how you start to say, you know what, I think I might need help. Mm-hmm. That's how I do it.
And so with your son, for example, how did you realize, you say he got diagnosed.
Yes.
So what kind of things happened that you thought? Okay,
so he was younger. You remember, what I just gave you were more for adults.
Yes.
So when, for a young student, does your child hear you? And I don't mean hear. Can your child process what you're saying? Can your child sit still even? Can they focus in school? Are they distracted easily? Do they hype? And people will say, oh, my kid doesn't have ADHD because he can sit in front of a video game. That doesn't mean he doesn't have ADHD. And just because your child is super smart, okay, your academic ability has nothing to do with whether you have an EF or ADHD. So you want to look at those types of things, like, can your child, to even to the granular level, can they remember the 3 or 4 instructions that you might have given them? I hear that so much with my parents who say, I gave my child a 4-step instruction and he only remembered the first thing. Can they sit and focus? Distraction is a big one. Hyperactivity is a big one. I think as parents, you start to hone in, and like for my son, I just knew. I knew that sitting still was very difficult. Being able to focus was super, super difficult. The focusing, being able to process what I was saying was really hard too.
Yeah. So you gave me some examples for when your son was young.
Right.
You also gave me some examples for an adult.
Right.
But you also specialize in students. So can I include, is that teens?
Yes, teens.
So what kind of things do you see there then?
Okay, so what I see, the biggest thing I see with students would be time management for them. Mm-hmm. It's again, interesting. When a teen comes to me, again, it's not about organization. This is what it's not about organization of stuff and space. They pretty much have figured that out. It's about their time. It's about seeing time. It's about future awareness. It is about understanding that something that is due a week from now, even a month from now, needs to be in their horizon and might even have to be dealt with now. That is by far the number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 thing I see with students. It's what I call future awareness, is not just looking and saying, oh, this is what I have to do today. I did everything today. I'm done. It's being able to look to the future and say, okay, I need to get prepared now for what's coming next. Okay, it's that and procrastination. Those are my 2 biggest things that when I am with a student. And then also study skills, but that's a whole other conversation. And that's a whole other thing, is really understanding how to study.
Yes. And it's interesting that you say, because I have, as you know, a 12-year-old son who is now in secondary school. And I'm also trying to teach him to go, okay, what was in your planner for today, for homework for tomorrow? And he's like, oh, okay, I'm done. I can play video games, or I can be on a little while on the computer, or watch a YouTube video. And I'm like, okay, that's nice, Max, but what else is there in your diary? Is there any something you can do now? So I'm trying to teach him.
Right.
Is there anything? And he started to grasp that idea that if a project is bigger, you have to do a little bit now, and a little bit at the end of the week, and a little bit next week.
You have to break it down into manageable chunks. Yes, I'm with you. But what's even more important is that, and this is, this is my, everybody, this is my mantra. This is what people hear me say all the time. And this doesn't matter if you're a student or even an adult. If you cannot see your time, you cannot learn to manage it. So if you don't know what else you have going on, you need to be able to see the whole picture. So if you have, let's say, if you are a student and it's Monday night and you don't have a test till Friday, you might say, no problem. I don't need to deal with this now. It's in the future. I'll do it then. But if you don't see that Thursday evening, you don't get home till 9 o'clock at night from, let's say, theater practice or soccer, whatever it is, and you're not going to study, then that work for that exam needs to happen now. So not only do you need to see what you have, like your assignments or appointments, you also need to see when you have the time to do it. So that is my big thing. It's you have to be able to see your time in order to learn how to manage it, whether you're an adult or a student.
Mm-hmm. Because I know, I'm going to skip my other question. I'm going to keep a question.
Okay.
Because now we're talking about time. I know that besides helping your clients declutter and writing articles and coaching students, you also created the academic planner.
Yes.
The tool for time management. So now we're talking about time all the time. Can you tell me a bit more about this planner? Because it's a big
deal.
Yeah.
I love how you say it's time to talk about time. And it's exactly what we just talked about. Again, I always say, and I think we're all like this, we're all accidental entrepreneurs in the sense of if we don't see something we need, we just create it ourselves. It's just kind of how we are. And so very similar. I was, same exact thing. I was working with students. I'm going to try to make this story short too. Working with students. And my thing, again, is the time management piece. And again, what you have to remember is time management is a life skill. It's not a school skill. It is a skill that we all need, whether we are 8, 18, or 80. And I could not find anything on the market. And I like paper planners, at least to be able to, even if you're using a computer to see what you have, I still want you to put it into paper so you can see everything as a whole. I couldn't find, and I started creating my own. I was buying things and cutting and pasting, and eventually people saw it, and I gave them to my clients, and then my parents and my clients, do you have more of them and more of them? And I don't need to tell you that story. But the point of it was that what I put on that planner was the piece that I just described, which is when you have the time. I say this to parents all the time. It's not about asking your student what they have to do. It's about asking them when they have the time to do it. Then they have future awareness. Then they understand what their time management, that time management piece is happening. Because most students will just look linearly. They'll say, okay, it's Monday, I got to Tuesday. But I need you to look further down the road than that. And to do that, you need to see when you have time. You need to see when you have dance class or sports or grandma's coming for dinner, or do you know what I'm saying? You need to have that piece. So our planners marry what you have to do and when you have time by putting in that piece, natural blocks of time appear. So a student can naturally see when they have time for something.
Yeah, it's really amazing because I looked at your planners online, and I know they are developed for the American market, obviously, because you have a weekly schedule, don't you? And here in the UK, my son had a 2-weekly schedule. So I thought, I thought the planner is great, but of course we have a 2-weekly schedule, so you can't put his school in on the left, But having said that, I think
we have some UK students. So we do. We have people well, Canada is our second largest market after the US, but Australia, New Zealand, UK, right now, any English-speaking country, because people have asked us to take them and, what's the word I'm looking for? Translate them, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
Yeah. I think you're right, though, because a lot of the school hours are still the same, but the afternoons are every week. So it could actually, you're right. Of course it could work. Of course it could work. And
we have students in university over in the UK who use them. Absolutely. Yeah. So yes. And listen, we hit on something because they have, one of the things we're seeing is more and more people are going back to paper planners, which is a very interesting thing because they find them less distracting and easier to use than opening an app. And students say that when they go into their phones to try to write something down, they get very distracted. So we are seeing that. But it goes back to this whole thing that our biggest thing is teaching people time. And seeing time is not easy because you can't hold it. Mm-hmm. So what my mission was to try to make time very visual.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love that thing about time, what you're saying, it's not visual, because I do ask my clients sometimes, I talk to them about when they do jobs in the day, and they say, okay, you need to, how often do you change your beds, for example? And they're like, well, I only do it once every 2 or 3 weeks because it takes me forever. And I'm like, well, how long does it take you?
Right. How long is forever?
Yes.
How long is forever?
Yes. And then, or I say, why don't you in the morning unload your dishwasher? Oh, I don't have time. And I'm like, but it takes about 5 to 7 minutes to unload a dishwasher. And they're like, no, it takes me much longer. I said, well, why don't you time yourself?
Time yourself. We do that all the time.
And then you can see how long it takes, because then you realize that some things take much shorter than you think, while other things
100%.
Take longer than you think.
Yes, right. Well, my joke is when I work with students, I give them a list of different activities in their life, not school, meaning not how long it takes you to do it, but possibly if you're in charge of, let's say, emptying a dishwasher, taking a shower, walking your dog, making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Sorry, here in the States, that's a big thing. So just all different things, but that are not school related, meaning not like how long does it take you to write a paragraph?
Yeah.
I want them to be more cognizant of their time and just everyday tasks. Everyone answers 20 minutes. Yeah. Everything for 20 minutes. Which shows me exactly, to your point, that they are not time aware. And the first step is knowing how long something takes you to do.
Yeah.
That is if I was putting together a list of steps to become more time management savvy. Mm-hmm. The first thing is understanding, to your point, exactly how long something takes.
Yeah.
So even your people at home, it's a great exercise. Pick the 10 things that you do on a daily basis, like making your bed, emptying a dishwasher, possibly walking your dog, any of those things, and write down what you think, how long you think it takes you to do, and then time yourself. It's very, very eye-opening, and it's a fun thing, and it's a little game-like too, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. So I would not challenge in a bad way, but give that exercise to all of your listeners to do. Pick how long you think and how long it actually does.
I think that's interesting, because I think that's why people who are disorganized run late, because they want to cram a task into something which can't be crammed in anymore because it takes longer than they think it will take.
100%.
Yeah.
So there's an exercise actually called time mapping. And I do this a lot too with students. But again, these exercises can easily be done if you are an adult at home. Mm-hmm. So perfect example is I had a parent call me and say, I need to help my daughter with time management. She just doesn't have enough time to get her work done. So I said, all right, let me see what's going on. And here was a student, I'm going to make the story short, that had to she played tennis every day and had to be at the tennis place at 5:00, and she got out of school every day at 2:45. So I asked her, how many hours do you think, or how much time do you think you have to do your homework prior to getting to tennis? And her answer was 2 hours. I'm like, really? Okay, let's break it down. And we time mapped. By the time she got out of school, by the time she got home, by the time she ate a snack, by the time she walked the dog, by the time she changed her clothes, by the time they drove the 20 minutes, she basically only had at home 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's that time awareness of thinking, I have 2 hours to get homework done. I really only have 40. No wonder why she wasn't getting anything done.
Yeah.
We made some changes. We left her at school. Sometimes we got rid of having to walk the dog so she would have more time. But doing that time mapping really created the awareness for both the parent and the student.
Yeah. Little side step that I want to ask you, because I know, can you give me advice about clocks? Because I know you have a very big thing about clocks, and I want our listeners to know that as well. What's your thing about clocks?
My thing about clocks is, and it's so funny because I'm in my office and I have my big clock right over to my right, which I'm looking at. So I try to find things that work for everybody and that are not expensive. So I'm you've heard me say this, that every home that you spend, and every room in the home that you spend time in has to have what I call an analog clock. And for those that might not remember what an analog is, honey, I just spoke a week ago and I asked parents in the room who knows what an analog is, and half the room didn't. Is the clock that has the hand that goes around. It cannot be digital. It must be that old-fashioned clock. You need to hang one of those in every room of your house. And I would say particularly the rooms that your children spend time in, their bedrooms, the bathroom even, kitchen, because again, they need to be able to see time move. It's where we start teaching time management. Time is three-dimensional. It has a beginning, it has an end, it has a middle, it has a future, it has a past. So unless, I always do this, so I always show a digital and I say you can only see one time on a digital, and that's the present. Yeah. With an analog, you get this really nice organic feel of time. You can see 15 minutes go by. You can see 15 minutes ahead. Mm-hmm. So analog clocks, not expensive, and a great way to start training the brain on time management.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think it takes longer for people with ADHD to get organized or to grasp the time, space
yes.
stuff? Yeah.
I do, but for a different reason than you probably think.
Okay.
I think it's not so much that it takes them time to actually organize. I think for those with ADHD or executive dysfunction, I think it's harder for them to find systems that work for them, because for so long they have, and I'm not trying to group everybody. Obviously nothing's an absolute. I need to say that, please don't yell and say, that's not true for me. I know that. We all know that. But I think for so long that what happens is we all go, even those with ADHD and EF, we try what's conventional. We try what's typical. All right, I'll try a filing system, or I'll try the basket on the kitchen table. They try the more conventional, the more typical, and those might not work for those of us that have ADHD or EF challenges. So I think it takes longer to find those systems, those scaffolds, and those structures that really work for us. And sometimes they're so quirky and out of the box and completely different when someone who might not have that. But I think once you find what works for you, then we're good to go. So it's not so much that. I think it's really finding the system that takes the time. And that's where the professional organizer comes in my book. They're the one who's trained to really listen to you, hear what you're saying, hear what you're not saying, ask the right questions, and really present you with some things that you might not have thought of yourself. Mm-hmm. I always say this about organizers: if they're trained correctly, and our group is, they're not going to come in with typical answers. They're going to come in with things that are so like out of the box and fit, just customized just for you. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, where we do our best work.
Yeah, I think it's true, because as a professional organizer, you don't do the same thing with every different client.
Exactly.
Because you need to figure out what works for them.
Right.
Because when a client says to me, Ingrid, where should I put it? And I'm like, I can give you loads of different options, but where would you go and look for it?
Right. So right, exactly. So let's ask you some really good questions. And some of them are fun. Like I ask, are you a revealer or a concealer? Meaning, do you need to have everything out, or do you like to, are you a piler? Are you a filer? And they're funny. They're great questions. They're funny. Who else in the home has to have access? Do you look down or do you look up? I have a client from years ago that everything hangs on the wall, because that's her eye line. She doesn't look down. She only wanted things on her wall. So everything is hung, which is a little quirky and different, but for her, it works. Do you know what I'm saying? So my point is, like, we are schooled and trained to come in there and work with you to figure out what is going to be just for you. And I think once we find that system, yes, things need tweaking and you might get bored of a system, or I don't know, bored is the right word. What we also have to remember is life goes on, things happen. So we constantly have to be moving along with that. But I think what you just said is key. Is it's about creating the system that works. Once we do, then I think people can stay organized.
Now, exactly. And you mentioned, of course, professional organizers being able to help. But of course, our Declutter Hub community is all about motivating people to get started on their decluttering journey. So I would love some of your advice on what our listeners with ADHD can do themselves at home if they want to get started. And at the beginning of this podcast, you already mentioned a few things you did at home. So I want to delve a little bit deeper into those things. What can somebody who has ADHD realizes that besides an analog clock in every room, what other examples can you give me? What can they do themselves?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, I'm going to give you different little things. One of the things, and I think I literally just said it, if you want to get started on your own journey of coming up with systems that work for you, I want you to ask yourself some of the questions that I just even posed. Like, are you a filer or a piler? Do you need to have things out? Not out in a disorganized way, but do you need to see it? Because for some of us with ADHD, what we don't see doesn't exist. Yeah. So that's a big one. I find that to be a very big one. And maybe the way for that is things are clear. I think you need to look at your home and ask this question too. This is a big one. Does everything in your house have a home? Everything needs to have its home. And so that should help you zero in on maybe the hot spots that don't. Again, with time management, I'm all about the clock. Here's one of my favorite tips for getting you started on actually decluttering. I find sometimes with like an organizing project for an individual trying it at home, they get overwhelmed by the sheer like enormity of what they might have to do. So here's 2 tips. I like to separate out the setup from the task. So to make it easier for you at home, I want you, when you're starting, let's say you just want to declutter your closet, or you're just going to declutter the pantry. We'll just use that. I want you to just focus on getting yourself set up for one day. But that's all you're going to do. So possibly that could mean getting all your supplies together. Let's say you need bins for donate, or the bin for the garbage, because there might be things that are spoiled and we want to get rid of them. That's what I'm saying here. Things like that. My point is, when you do that, when you do that, the beauty of it is you're only focusing on the setup, which makes getting started easier. You're not as overwhelmed. And now, as you walk by the next day, you see the visual of this project needs to get started. And you have everything around you to get started. I see so many times where someone wants to get started on an organizing project on their own, and they're like, oh, but I don't have my labels, or I don't have a bin, or, oh, I forgot the garbage. So all I want you to do at home is think about what you need to get started, not meaning what you need to set up, not get started. That's the first thing. Separate, and that also helps with the procrastination. Separate out the setup from the task. Okay, that to me is huge. And then another one that I used to use all the time is if you are going into, let's say, your dining room, and it's filled with like stuff and papers, and you are just spinning in circles, and try covering everything with black tablecloths. Because what happens is a lot of us open up a door to a room and we see, oh, I should be working on that, the dresser and the top of the dresser. Oh, but look at the pile on the floor. But oh no, look at that chair over there. And we spin in circles and we walk back out and we pour ourselves some wine. At least I do.
Here in England, it's probably tea.
Okay, or tea. All right, here in New York, baby, it's wine. So what we do is we have our clients cover everything. And I have to tell you, my clients say to me, this has helped them more than anything else. They cover things with a black tablecloth, everything in the room other than what they're going to work on.
Okay.
Because what we don't see doesn't exist. So if you can cover things, it doesn't have to be black, it could be green, I'm just saying dark tablecloth, opaque. Mm-hmm. So now all I want you to do is focus on what you see, only on that small thing. Or the other thing you could do, is take it out of the room. That I find is very helpful too. So if you are working on your pantry and it is an utter mess and declutter and you haven't looked at it in years, but your kitchen table is pretty empty, take it into another room where you're not visually distracted by all the other clutter.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome advice. And also, I think something stuck with me as well that I thought listeners might find very interesting. You said taking doors of wardrobes.
So when I still do this, I still even virtually will say to a parent, again, I go back to that whole thing that what you don't see doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So if you're even an adult and you can't, and your closet is too difficult for you to manage, what I like to do immediately is I take the door off the closet. And for some who don't want to see the whole thing, I just have them hang like, just gauzy curtains or plain white curtains on either side. So you can do that. Because again, I always say you have to look at your home as barrier to entries. Mm-hmm. What are you not seeing? And a closet door is a barrier to entry. So if it's too hard for you and you're not putting things away, it could possibly be because it's too difficult for you to open the door and see what's behind it. So get rid of the closet door. If you have a young child, get rid of the dresser and put clear bins around the room with a little sign on top of it, what goes in the bin. Because the other thing, and I didn't say this, particularly for younger children, is if it takes them more than a few steps to do, they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So if they have to open a heavy dresser drawer and find a shirt or the reverse, fold it and put it back, how easy is a bin with pajamas in it that I can just in the morning take my pajamas off as a kid and just throw it in the bin? That's it. It's organized enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the same with laundry baskets. If my clients say, oh my gosh, laundry is a nightmare. And I'm like, well, where's the laundry basket? Yeah, well, it's in the other room. And
right.
No wonder clothes don't end up in your laundry basket, right? Because they have to walk with stuff
right.
to another room.
Too many steps. And so it's too many steps and it's not there. So I love clear bins on a wall sometimes. And say, now your child will grow up. People ask me this all the time. I'm like, yes, your child will, graduate back to dressers and graduate. But if you have a very young child and it's very difficult, doing something like that can really help foster their independence and just foster systems. So I love that. I love that tip as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. What do you think, listeners? Fantastic advice, right? Now, Leslie, if our listeners would like to know a lot more about you, your planners, maybe find out more about the ADD magazine that you are a writer for, where can they find out more about you?
Okay, so I'm going to make this easy. The name of our company is Order Out of Chaos. And if they just go to orderoochaos.com. So everything we do, we have other websites. If you start there, you can find us about our webinars, our workshops. You can find our products. You can find the magazines you talked about, you can get to our social media sites from there. So just go to orderoochaos.com and you're good to go.
We will put this in the show notes, listeners. So don't worry if you didn't have a pen. If you're driving around somewhere, you're listening to this in the car, don't worry. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put the link to the website there if you'd like to know more about time management, ADHD, etc., executive functions. Maybe listen to a webinar that Leslie sometimes does. You can register for that. She's got lots and lots of good stuff on her website. So Anything else, Leslie, you would like to add, or have we covered?
Oh my God, my head is spinning. I don't want to overwhelm everyone. The only thing I want to say when it comes to parents who might be looking at their children, I give parents don't give themselves enough credit. You will know if your child is struggling. Listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to what they're not saying. Ask them questions. Call the school. Find out what the teachers are saying. Just gather, do your due diligence. Gather information, and take it from there. It's okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. And that's it for this episode. We hope you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. Thank you, Leslie, for being our guest. I've loved talking to you and finding out more about organization and time management when you've got ADHD. Listeners, I hope you've learned a lot today as well, and Leslie's examples will be helpful for you and you can implement them in your own home. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. If you'd like to get more tips and advice, please follow us on social media. And if you don't want to miss the next episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and don't forget to tune in next week.